So what we're going to look at now is an example where I think I might use a conic section instead of a G2 blend surface. So in this case, what I've done is I've created this little cylindrical thing, not really cylindrical, more egg-shaped extrusion, and I've put a slightly rounded top on top of it with a compound curve so that we can demonstrate this. And on one side, you can see the purple I've labeled a G2 blend surface. On the other side, I've created a one of these magic conic section blends, where this section here is actually a conic, as described in the previous tutorial. And I have set them up to be very similar. As you can see, there's a slight difference in how far they go out. I could actually pretty easily adjust that. So in this case, I'm going to adjust the row value on my, let's see here. I'm going to adjust the row value on this guy and bring it in just a little bit, and we'll see if this, yeah, that's better. Right, so the conic and the G2 blend look, by all intents and purposes, pretty much the same. Now, if I look at these under a an analysis, first of all, I'll just show a single band mapping analysis, which is very similar to zebra stripes, except there's only one zebra stripe instead of many. And what you can see here is that both of these surfaces are very smooth. The transition here between this stripe and this stripe is very nice and clean and continuous on both sides. Now, if okay, here we go. Now you can see from this angle that this stripe comes up and then kind of abruptly changes directions. That is because the conic is actually a tangent continuous surface, not a curvature continuous one. As you can see here, the curve continues smoothly. But I would say by most standards this conic is pretty darn good, right? It's pretty darn close to what you would want. And if I hide the band mapping, I could show an environment map, and you would also see the same kind of thing, where on the left side, the conic section, you'll see an abrupt change as I move this. There's an abrupt change between this long stretched out stuff and this squunched up stuff right along this edge. Whereas on this side, if we rotate around, the change is much more gradual along that edge. But it's a very, very subtle thing, and you really, honestly, in most cases probably wouldn't notice it, and this geometry really is much cleaner and much lighter. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of that. First of all, I'll just cancel this guy, turn that off, and look at a curvature analysis here. So I've created an intersection. Actually, let me update this analysis real quick to reflect the new curvature. There we go. So as you can see here with these little mouse ears I've put on here, the G2 curve, if I look closely, the radii are the same at this point, right? And the radii are the same at this point. Whereas over here, we're merely tangent at these 2 points. Now, I could adjust my sweep, and so let's try a row value of 0.65, say. And that gets us a little bit closer. Try a row value of 0.7. A little bit closer. Row value of 0.8. And now we're pretty darn close to G2 up there. The problem is that obviously I don't have the same control over how curved this is. So this is G2 and round. This is close to G2, but it's forcing me to do a much harsher curve. I just wanted to show you that, though. By adjusting the row value, I can get very, very close to G2. It's just that the shape changes, right? So you have to be aware of that limitation. So if I change this back to 0.6 so that we're back to being similar. So we can see that these are both very smooth curves. Now, what if I were to move this this edge here up, in effectively making this radius much smaller? I'm going to move it right on up there. Now, look at what happens. Right here, if we look closely, we can see that our G2 continuous surface has actually OG'd on us, meaning that the curvature has actually inverted on us. And by looking, we might not even notice that. It's very subtle, but as you can see here, it actually is doing it. Whereas the conic surface stays nice and clean and convex the whole time. So I can move this, this edge anywhere that I want to. Here, I'll move it even closer. And as we can see, we stayed very nice and clean and convex on the conic side, whereas on the G2 side, now we're definitely even visually seeing the OG take place. And I could fix that by changing the tension on this side of the G2 blend, but that requires manual adjustment and is easily overlooked. So if I want a nice surface that I know will always be convex, then a conic is a very clean way of getting that. I'll change this back to where it was, and we don't need the curvature analysis anymore. Don't really need that curve. The one other thing that we could look at is a dress up of this guy. And basically, let me just make this a different color so we can see a little better. Oh, come on. 1 second here. Reset properties. Do it. Let's just make it black so we can see really well. Alright, so as you can see here on the conic side, on the left, we have the same number of horizontal or U parameters. But if we look on top view, and this is kind of a subtle difference, but if you count the number of V direction spines here, you'll see that the G2 side has almost twice as many as the conic side. Now this doesn't seem very dramatic. This is a very subtle example, but in a lot of cases, when you make G2 fill surfaces and blend surfaces, you'll find that they're much, much, much heavier in terms of their dress-up grid than the conic section would be. I'm going to give you another example of that in a future tutorial. For now, thanks for watching and happy surfacing.